of you have met me. Okay. Um, I am Terry Reagans, the Torrance Council of PTA's president, and this is my second year as president, but I've been around Torrance Council for, I figured out the other day, almost 30 years. So I've been around for a very long time, and appreciate actually having the chance to work with you all and with the school district doing some really different and unusual sorts of collaborative things, which we are working on doing this year. So I thank you for being with us. I appreciate all of you, meaning the presidents and the parliamentarians, for being here, because and it makes sense to us that oh, actually, let me introduce Diane Wong too, who is here, who is the Torrance Council parliamentarian, and she will be participating too. And please, Diane, jump in if there's anything that you have to add to anything that's happening, or just things that you want to throw in. And then Amanda Gutierrez is here as our seventh VP from Torrance Council, who is doing our technology tonight. So thank you all. But it makes sense to us to have parliamentarians and presidents here at the same time, because you two in particular sort of represent the leadership of your PTA at your school. And in fact, that's why we have you here together, because you'll be doing similar things and supporting and advising each other on things that are happening to you and with you at your school. So hopefully it's helpful to both of you and you can use the information together. If you are here and your president is not, as a parliamentarian, please share it with them. If you are here as a president and your parliamentarian is not, same thing, so that you have similar information. So we are going to go ahead and go on to the next slide. Much of what we're going to talk about is from Running Your PTA Made Easy. That is a California PTA publication that was, believe it or not, just updated in August of this year. So it is the most up-to-date publication that I know of from CAPTA, and that's why I'm using it for this presentation. So all of the information that we will be sharing tonight in some form or other is in Running Your PTA Made Easy. That publication will be on our website. It's already on the CAPTA website. And in fact, you probably received it in your summer mailing. Some of you got the old version from last year. Some of you got the new version. But either way, this new version will be available to you. Part of the reason I'm using this is that at our association meeting on October 12th, which really is a sort of a revolutionary time to interact and collaborate with your principal from your school, we will be giving them a hard copy of this publication. So they will have this information at their fingertips to use in terms of trying to understand and get a feel for what PTA is doing at their school. So I want to make you familiar with it and make sure you had it in your hands, since we were going to be sharing it with them. By the way, I said that you two are the leaders of your PTA, the president and the parliamentarian, but keep in mind that in fact, you are not the decision makers of your PTA. Does that make sense to people? Anybody have any comments about that? I really want to emphasize that, because there is no individual that is the quote unquote decision maker. A lot of times people will come to you as a PTA president and say, tell me what to do about this, because I know your PTA needs to make a choice about this. But it's not up to you as an individual or to your parliamentarian or the two of you as a team. But we will talk about the different groups that it needs to be presented to, so that you can be sure at least that you've gone through the decision-making process as PTA intends you to. Okay, so on to the next slide, please. And the first thing that you are going to need to have in mind, again for October 12th, but even more so for your PTA in general, is that setting goals is really important and should be paramount for you as you're looking at everything that you're doing as a PTA and what purpose it's going to serve, where it's going to take you to school, how it's going to be beneficial to your students at your school, and how it will help you to be collaborative with your school administrators. So you will be looking at goal setting on October 12th. That's part of what the work time will be for with your principal. So please just take a look at that. And there's other things that have to do with goal setting. But this was just kind of a sketch of what it might look like to start with. So on to the next one. Just to remind you all, and or to inform some of you, since some of you are really new to PTA, is that you have a number of different kinds of meetings. First and foremost, your general membership is your association, meaning all the people that are members of your association. And all of that people involved in that group are the ones that approve programs and activities and all of those things. They are the association in your PTA. So keep that in mind. Go back for a second. Your principal, by the way, is an essential partner and is your advisor in a number of different things, but is also part of your association. And in fact, it is part of your executive role too. For all of our schools, I believe, in fact, in our bylaws, it specifies that your principal is part of your executive board and your association. Okay, next slide. So the types of meetings that you have, I think most of you have now by now had probably at least 2 of these. Your association, that means again, that entire membership meeting. For most of us recently, it was at the back to school events, so that you were presenting information about what was happening at your PTA to that large group. And that large group is the one that elects your committee, your nominating committee, adopts bylaws and standing rules. And in fact, everything that you do at executive board level should be run by the association in some way, shape, or form to get their ratification or approval. So your association meetings, you usually will have 3 to 5 of them in a year. Torrance Council has 3. Elementaries tend to have a few more. And high schools may only have a few, but it's up to you to be aware of those meetings and make sure that you present the things you need to present at those meetings. Next slide, please. The meeting that you have every month for all of you is your executive board meeting. And that's the one that your officers attend and your principal and your teacher representatives. That actually is a given part of your PTA, unless you have eliminated that from your bylaws. And I don't think anybody in Torrance Council has, have they, Diane? Have they taken out teacher reps? Okay, I know that some have because it's been a very contentious thing, but in Torrance Council, we in general have really good relationships. And don't forget that at those executive board meetings, there are standing committee chairs that are to be part of that meeting too. That in your bylaws, by the way, I referred to the bylaws a number of times, and Diane will tell you more about that. In your bylaws, it tells you who your standing committees are, and therefore the chairs of those committees in particular need to be at those executive board meetings every month, because they're supposedly doing things that are ongoing for your PTA unit. So you want to keep abreast of what is happening. The last line there, I think, is worthy of making sure that you notice that all members of your executive board must be members of your association. What that means is that all of your executive board have to join. Now, you would assume that that's the case, but please do not assume that. You need to really verify that and make sure that that is the case. We have had situations, in fact, I can think of 3 or 4 of them now, in which those folks have been put onto committees, nominating committee for one, and done nominating committee work. And then we found they weren't members, so that was not actually a legitimate placement of them on that committee. We don't want to see that happen. So if we all just check that all of our executive board members are members of our PTA association, it would take care of that, hopefully for that. I do want to mention, by the way, that there is a third kind of a meeting that Torrance Council actually holds. So at Torrance Council, we too have a large association meeting, which is what is happening on October 12th. It will be all of the PTAs in Torrance, the PTA presidents, the delegates from each unit, and the principals from each school, as well as administrators from TUSD. So all of those people will be joining us. They're our association. We also have executive board meetings, which are the meetings that you presidents come to every month. I hope that we're seeing you on a monthly basis. But Torrance Council also has a board of directors meeting every month. So our leadership group, meaning our elected officers, also meet individually apart from the presidents and do planning and goal setting, and then come to work with the executive board on all of those things. And everything that the BOD does and everything that the executive board does eventually is passed by the association, as we talked about before. Okay, next. Most of you have committees and committee meetings that will meet as necessary. The chairs attend, the members attend, and the president is a member and advisor to all committees except the nominating committee. So in fact, you as a president should make sure that you are aware of the committee meetings when they're happening and the committee work that is happening. Make sure they have event plans that they're creating for the events that they're hoping to run, and that they've done sufficient planning and have all of their ducks in a row. Do not let them go on having an event without having gotten proper approval, and make sure that all of the groups involved have said, yes, this is how we want to see the event happen, and this is how we want to see the money spent on that event. So that's really important for you as a president. We've had, again, I am only speaking from experience. There have been several instances where that hasn't happened, and people haven't kept track of what was going on in committees, and the committee has had major problems and issues because of it. So again, we're trying to prevent issues down the road for you. Next slide. I'll let you go ahead and read through this. You do need to give 10 days notice of any meeting. That if you have it on your regular calendar, that probably qualifies as notice. You will notice that you will receive the invitation for our October 12th meeting today. It may be a few hours late, but we're close to the 10 days notice, so that you know what will be on that association agenda and what we will be voting for. On this slide also, it repeats that all members of the executive board must be members of the association. And you'll notice that now all of our bylaws allow for teleconferencing. That is something that's new and different, that was previously not permitted at all. And now, in fact, it's allowed. But I have to say that I personally, and in fact, 33rd District and California PTA are recommending that if you can at all, start meeting in person. You can do it fairly safely. It's a whole different dynamic and interaction that happens. So please, if you can, do try to start meeting in person. Okay, next slide. This checklist for a healthy PTA identifies all of the things that are essential aspects for you to pay attention to as a PTA president and as a parliamentarian, so that you know that your PTA is doing the things they need to do in the way they need to do them, and that you're proceeding with things to try to be the most successful you can at your school. By the way, most of these things are not things that we have just made up in PTA. These are things that nonprofit law require, and things that we're trying to help you to be able to meet the necessary requirements, so that you're fitting all of those things in, as well as doing the fun and neat stuff that you get to do in working with the students. So do pay attention to all those, including bylaws. There's bylaws again, and membership and minutes and annual reports and leadership training and financial procedures, treasurer's report and audits. All of those things are important. And in the next few pages, there's a bunch of information about each and every one of those to fill you in on the kinds of things that they want you to keep in mind when you're looking at those things. And if you can go through, and again, in the actual publication, it's not exactly checklist form, but it is kind of listed. If you can go through them and check all those things off, then your PTA is fine and dandy in everything that you're doing. But I can tell you that even going through for council, there are some things that we're kind of doing and some things we certainly could tweak and do better. So we actually use that to do checkups for ourselves from time to time. Okay, next page is more of the same. Okay, this is something I wanted to address here, and I will talk about it just a little bit, but I don't want to harp on it because I think we probably need to do sort of an intensive workshop on this aspect in particular. There's a handout that actually I created about 10 years ago, and it's called The Legal Aspects of Running an Event. So even if you're a healthy PTA and you're doing all the things that you should be doing to keep yourselves in good stead as a PTA, in Torrance Unified and in Torrance Council, there are many things that need to be done to make sure that you plan and arrange everything you need to arrange to have an event at your PTA. So I'm going to go down each column just to identify the things that are here. As Diane's saying, that the handouts are on the website and will be there. And in fact, this particular handout has been there for a long period of time because we think it's so important. We keep updating it and upgrading it as things change. So event planning. I mentioned the event plan. There is such a thing on, actually that is also on our Torrance Council of PTA's website. It's a fillable form that you can fill out and identify the event, identify the chairperson, create a work plan for that event, and then present that plan to your PTA before anything goes forward. You also sort of get a feel for how much expense there's going to be and how those expenses will be distributed, what it will be spent on, what the expenditures will be. All of that is within that plan that then can be approved by the board and can be brought forward as a sort of an ongoing progress report as the event moves forward. So I really, really want to encourage you, if you are not doing those event plans, please do. We do them at Torrance Council. In fact, at our last executive board meeting, in that drive, there were 3 different event plans. One for Project Hope, one for Project Boss, and one for the voter registration event that we're going to be having, all of which we're outlining the things that are going to be done in those programs for the entire year with the expenditures attached and who was going to do it and how it was going to be done. So if you want to know what they look like, check that out. But do try to see if you can't get your folks to plan ahead and do those things far enough in advance that you have a really good sense of what's going to be happening. The next column is the TUSD requirements. This is something that we didn't used to pay much attention to until I became more involved in TUSD things. And I became aware of what they wanted to have from PTA in order to make sure that everything was kosher for them to be sponsoring our events on their campuses. And the main thing, which I hope that most of you have heard of at this point, is that you do need to file a use of facilities form for using any campus facility for any event, up to and including actually your board meetings, that you should apply. In fact, they give you a permit to use a specific room for a specific amount of time or a specific part of your campus green space or blacktop or whatever it is that you're needing to use. But you need to make sure that you have that use of facilities permit in hand when you're doing anything on our school campuses. that they will check your insurance, your PTA insurance, and they will make sure that you are have met all of their requirements in order to be able to offer you that permit, and make sure that you're, again, sort of towing the line according to their needs. There is a sign and banner permit that you also need to do. So if you want to put those big banners up on your fence, you're not supposed to just put them up. There's actually a process to go through to request, again, permission to do that. There's also a food truck procedure. We have all of these things on our Torrance Council website, but they are all on the Torrance Unified School District website too. They've added all these things because we've asked them to. If they're requirements, we need to have them readily available to us. There's a food truck procedure. They will tell you where to go to see what the current list of food trucks that are available and licensed in the city of Torrance are at any given time. That varies considerably from time to time. And you really are bound to have to use ones that are licensed, because if you use unlicensed trucks, they can come in and shut down your event. And believe it or not, I've actually seen that happen. We say there's no PTA police. Well, there are Torrance police, and they will, in fact, enforce their rules and regulations. So we don't want to see that happen on any of our campuses. There's also a wellness policy. In fact, we will be having the nutrition services people come talk to us at the November executive board meeting about our wellness policy and the requirements for serving food to our students on campus, and what standards you need to meet before that food will be accepted, and time requirements, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another thing that you need to attend to. I think probably by now, all of us know about the volunteer registration process and sorting that out. Oh, and by the way, hot off the presses, if you registered as a volunteer, last year you had to upload two things. One was proof of your vaccination, and the other was the TB assessment. This year, you're not required to have the proof of vaccination to upload. I don't know how many of you know that or are aware of that, but if your people went on and tried to do it and were trying to put in their proof of vaccination, no longer required. So make sure you let people know that. And that it's not an error in something that's happening for them online. But then there's also the Raptor system that's still happening on all of our campuses to get approval to be on the campus and make sure that you do sign in and out and those things. And last but not least, there is a flyer approval process for Torrance Unified School District. So if you want to distribute something between schools, or that's more district-wide than just your individual school, then you need to go through their flyer approval process rather than our PTA flyer process. So those are all TUSD things. There's also PTA insurance. This gets lost, I think, oftentimes. And I want to make sure that you all do attend to that, because it's really important that you have insurance on board with any activity that you are doing. Because if you don't, and PTA insurance is not supporting whatever it is that you're doing, and something happens, then you as a board are liable for any liability that happens during that event. So please, please, Torrance Unified School District has been much more vigilant about making sure that we check with our insurance and that we meet the Torrance Unified insurance requirements too. It's our PTA insurance that's covering us when we're doing PTA events. But if something happens that our PTA insurance doesn't cover, then it falls by default onto Torrance Unified, and they're not happy when that happens. So we need to be aware and make sure we take care of that. There is, by the way, I just do not sign a hold harmless without consulting insurance. We've had a few times when they have said, yes, go ahead and do it. But in general, they don't appreciate that and will tell you never to do that. There is a participant waiver form, again, on our Torrance Council website, that is a joint form between Torrance Unified and Torrance Council. It's the kind of form that if some event's going to happen, then you only have to do it once. You don't have to do a Torrance Unified form and a Torrance Council form, which is what we used to have to do. So do not use the one at CAPTA. There is one in the toolkit that we'll talk about in a minute as a resource. That one does not have the provisions for the Torrance Unified piece. It has to be the Torrance Council one that has been modified to fit both of our purposes. So please do that. And just to mention that there is an incident report. If something does happen during an event, there is an incident report to fill out. That there are two of. You'll have to do one for Torrance Council, actually for the PTA insurance, and then in general for TUSD liability too. So just be aware of that. I'm not going to spend quite so much time on the last ones, that there are vendors and service providers. They will ask you to have certain requirements for your vendors, and it's really important. That's PTA insurance asking, as well as Torrance Unified Insurance. You will, in just a few months, actually, in the next month or two, in fact, we'll hear about it at the next executive board meeting, be asked to sign up for workers' comp insurance for your unit. And you will also be asked to sign up for a general umbrella policy of insurance through PTA. It's very inexpensive because we are such a large group in California PTA, and it works to their benefit to have such a large pool so that we can sort of distribute the risk. And then again, hold harmless, don't sign it, please. Contracts, there have to be two of you signing a contract. You remember I said the president cannot be considered the main decision maker. So in order to identify that and really sort of codify that, there are two people required to sign any contract. So you as a president can sign as one of the people, but someone else must sign with you. And hopefully that's only after you've had approval from your various boards to be able to sign that contract, including the association. That once the association says yes, then you can sign. Before that, it's not something you should be doing. And that contract can only be limited to a single year. So please do not assign a contract that extends over the time of a year. Be aware of that too. And last but not least, that last column, TOSD and TCPTA forms. The media release form, we have done similarly to the waiver form. We have created a joint form between Torrance Unified and Torrance Council that gives both of us permission to use media. So it's again on Torrance Council of PTA's website. It's different than the one in the CAPTA toolkit, and it's modified to meet the needs of our school district in particular. All the lawyers and everything have approved it. So it's really important to use that. And the same with the student waiver or participation form. There are some TUSD exceptions to the insurance guidelines. For those of you who know, there is a section of the CAPTA toolkit that is on our insurance piece. In fact, I believe we have the red light, green light guide that will be on our Torrance Council website. And those are the things that PTA approves and appreciates you to do. TUSD has their own requirements. So that's why it's so important to check with them and make sure that you have worked it out with them. And last but not least, there's fiduciary agreements that if you are contributing, intending to contribute a considerable amount to some particular project or purchase at the school, please fill out a fiduciary agreement so that it's a gentleman's agreement between you and your principal. It doesn't go to the district, it just stays at your school, but it says between us, we are agreeing that this is where this money is going to go and how it's going to be spent. And then it actually will be up to you to double check that when you are finished so that you can make sure it was spent correctly. And if there's anything left, get it back, because it's not that TUSD can keep it. By the way, I want to repeat that if you have a fiduciary agreement and check on to make sure how it was spent. If it wasn't spent entirely, you are entitled to receive it back. And then I'll let you go ahead and read the ending here of the other things, but just to be aware that there's so many things up to and including being careful about advertising. I just saw a question pop up from Cherie, and we'll do questions in a second. But Adventures in Art, if you're going to be utilizing the classroom apart from when it might be used as a classroom, then yes, you need to say that to do a permit. But if it's going to be used just during classroom time, you don't need to do a specific permit separate from that. Okay. So let's go on to the next four. I'll let them go ahead and read that one. I don't want to run you out of time, Diane. So resources to help you get started and to stay on track. By the way, it just shows you sort of the structure of PTA, that you are a unit and you are in council. We have no out of council units because that's why we have a Torrance Council of PTAs. In fact, all 30 of our schools in Torrance have PTAs and they're all in council. So we are all council units, and you are part of the council. We are part of 33rd District. We are part of California State and then the National PTA. So we're all part of that larger group. And that's all of our association actually, but they don't all vote for us, thank goodness. Okay, next slide. The things that you need to be aware of, and if you are not, please let us know, is the toolkit. It's on CAPTA. It tells you how to access it there. Actually, it says that hard copies were available. In fact, they were trying very hard not to send out hard copies. It's hundreds of pages. It's a very thick notebook full of pages. And in fact, it's just as accessible online. In fact, it's better with the search function online. So please, if you have any questions, check that and see what it has to say about your question. And your bylaws, and again, Diane will address that in just a second. You have your own bylaws that define everything for your unit, timelines, dates, important things. So please, please familiarize yourself with those bylaws. And in fact, e-bylaws are available to access those online, and in fact, revise those online, which is really awesome compared to what it used to be. You need to pay attention to tax filings. And the reason I mention it here as a resource is there's a specific tax information person at CAPTA that will help you with any tax questions or problems. A lot of times we don't realize that. We'll just call the IRS or something. Please don't do that. In fact, CAPTA says that specifically, because most of the people you'll get on the line on some other line won't know how to advise you. But if you use the CAPTA information, and in fact, it gives you the website here, or the email address and the phone number, please call them there. And similarly, the PTA insurance is AIM. They are the best people. I have never called and not gotten someone that I talked to and that was knowledgeable and could, if they didn't have the answer, they got back to me within just a few minutes. So they're amazingly helpful. That's their job, and they will be there for you. And then lastly, the thing that they mentioned here, the letter of determination, oftentimes we will need that to seek donations from community resources. And if you do not have a letter of determination, it tells you exactly how to go about getting that. Sometimes they will ask you to go through the council president, but I think lately they've been giving the LODs to presidents when they've been requesting them. So please do that if that's something of a need of yours. And I think that wasn't too bad. And I think it's now time to pass it over to more specifically parliamentarian sorts of things, but still relevant to the president and leadership. All right, Diane, take it away.
Okay. All right. Thank you, parliamentarians, for being here, and Terry for all the great information. I'm going to try to do this pretty quickly. Just so you know, I am available to you guys if you have questions. People ask me questions all the time, big and small. I do not mind. So feel free to email me whenever you have a question. But I just did want to kind of cover what do parliamentarians do. As Terry mentioned, you guys are really working very closely with the president, which is why the president gets to appoint you so they can pick somebody they want to work with. And you can decide together how you want to work your relationship with the parliamentarian. Basically, is that an advisor to the president. You should get to know your bylaws, understand parliamentary procedure, familiarize yourself with the PTA policies so that you can advise your president when they have questions about those things. So you're supposed to be the kind of authority on how things work for PTA. And also to assist your president with their meetings to make sure that things go smoothly. If people talking too much or getting off track or meetings are going too long, it's your job to help your president to make sure that that moves along well. The other two things that the parliamentarian does is chair the bylaws committee and also arrange the first meeting of the nominating committee, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later. You can kind of see the points there. So a quick word about parliamentary procedure. You may have heard this before, but it sometimes seems tedious and we think, why do we have to do all this and be all formal and all that? But really, it's there as an aid to help maintain order in meetings, to really give people an equal opportunity to have a voice. So we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to be heard and that the majority gets a chance to decide. And that is really the basis for all of the rules that we have. For example, why do we have to give 10 days or 30 days notice for meetings? It seems like kind of a technicality. But this is so that we don't call quick meetings and exclude the people that are going to vote against us. We have to give notice so that people have a chance to like, oh, I saw that thing because maybe I didn't check my email for 5 days, so I want to go to that meeting. Why we don't have proxy voting or decisions. People always say, well, can't we just vote, on the for the board? Can't we just send an email and ask everybody? And everybody's probably going to say, okay. But the idea is that whenever we make a decision, we should all come together and be able to hear all the sides of the argument so that we can make informed decisions. Why do we second motions and call for discussion is so that we make sure that it's not just one person that wants to talk about it. You have to at least have 2 people in order to talk about it. And again, the discussion so that people can share their point of view. Because maybe you might think one thing, but if you hear somebody else's point of view, you might change your mind. Okay, and why do we have quorum? Is to ensure that you have a majority deciding whenever you have a meeting so that we're not just making decisions because, with a small group of people, but that we're trying to include the most people that we can. On the right side of the slide, you'll see the 8 steps to a motion. I know you guys probably are familiar with that already, but I just had to throw that up there because that is part of parliamentary procedure. Couple of notes: in large meetings, we tend to be more formal because we're trying to maintain order. In your board meetings, you might be a little less formal, but generally speaking, presidents don't make motions, and you probably know that. And the reason is that they are trying to maintain impartiality, and that's why we don't make motions as presidents. But anybody else on your board can make a motion. If a committee chair is bringing something to the board and they're a part of your board, they can move to do something. If somebody is presenting, they should go ahead and make that motion. Presidents don't generally vote, and also to maintain impartiality, but if the vote is close, then you certainly should and can vote so that you can break that tie. As Terry sort of mentioned that already, only members of the group that is meeting have the right to attend, discuss and vote, and review the minutes. So you might have somebody who comes, that includes like your committee chairs that are not standing committee chairs. They might come to your meeting. You can invite anybody you'd like, but they don't get to vote and they don't count in your form. Bylaws. So here is a little sample of what your bylaws you guys should look like. You should all have a copy. If you don't, please let me know and I will send you a copy so that you have one. They should be available to all your board members. They are the governing rules and you must follow the bylaws. As Terry mentioned, a lot of it has to do with nonprofit corporation law. So it's not just random PTA rules that we're making up and throwing at you. It is actually to maintain our nonprofit status.
Does anyone that's here tonight not have your bylaws in hand that you can refer to at your meetings? Anybody at all? Okay, well, that's good. Glad to hear that.
Put it in the chat if you do, if you don't, and
Yeah.
I'm happy to send it to you. The president should have it, the parliamentarians should have it also, and make sure to share that with your board. If a member asks to see it, you need to provide it to them. Please do not share an electronic copy with anybody outside of your board. That our bylaws do have our financial information. It also has our official signatures in them, and we don't want them to get into the hands of people who may be trying to steal identities or do other nefarious things. A recommended way is to leave a copy, a hard copy in the office, and then if someone wants to see it, they can go in the office, look at it, not take it home with them, but review it there. And then that way you're protecting your bylaws. If you need to, so bylaws should be reviewed every year, just to make sure that everything is the way it should be, and they need to be updated at least every 5. Most of you guys are all good on that. When I was parliamentarian a couple of years ago, we pretty much like ran everybody through. There are a few of you that actually are having your bylaws up this summer, so I will be happy to help you through that process. I'm not going to really get into updating the bylaws, but I will send you some information. If you decide that you need to or want to update your bylaws, even though it's not the 5 years, that's totally fine. And please reach out to me and contact me, and I'll make sure to give you all the information for how to do that. In addition to the bylaws, at the back of your bylaws, you have standing rules, and those are really the procedure and details of the work. These are your rules that you guys make up, except for the couple of pages that are added to the state. But you guys get a chance to make up your own rules about how you want to run your PTA, and those are the things that go in your standing rules. They do not have to be approved by the state parliamentarian to be updated. You can change them and approve them at your board and your association. And then finally, the toolkit that Terry mentioned is a part of the procedures and guidelines that are not in the bylaws, but we are bound to uphold all things that are in the toolkit. So if you ever have a question about something and you don't know the answer, you can search the toolkit. There's a lot of information in there. If you can't find it, please feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to help. The final thing, I put a little note in there about Robert's Rules of Order, and that is really about parliamentary procedure. Yeah, if you want to know more about that, you can ask me, but I'm not going to bore you with that right now. Okay, the nominating committee. So the parliamentarian is in charge of calling the first meeting of the nominating committee, and basically you're giving them instructions and letting them know what they're supposed to do. You must elect your nominating committee at least 2 months before your election, and I really want to talk about this today because all of this should happen before the end of the year. So if you haven't done it already, there's a couple schools that had to do it at their very first meeting. If you have a next meeting, association meeting, before the end of the year is when you need to elect your nominating committee, because most of you have your elections in February, and you can find the date for that in your bylaws. And I put a bylaws cheat sheet in the website, on the training page. It's called the bylaws fillable summary sheet. As a parliamentarian, you should take that sheet. It's a PDF fillable, so just kind of flip through your bylaws, fill in all the things, and it'll be a nice cheat sheet for you and your president for like what your quorum is and who your people are and how much money you can spend in between meetings. There's a bunch of different stuff in there. That's very important to know. So you do have to actually elect your nominating committee. They are not appointed at your board and ratified. They're not, it's not just an approval. You have to have an actual election. You can put forth as the board some nominees for that if you have volunteers from your board. since, oftentimes we know that we're going to go to our association meeting, ask people, and they're not going to they're not going to want to do it. So it would be great to have some people already lined up when you go to your association meeting, but you also do need to ask for nominations from the floor, just like an election. I also put a script for electing the nominating committee on the website, so you can read through that. And in your bylaws, we'll tell you the number of members and alternates on your bylaws committee. And again, your nominating committee must all be members of your association. They cannot serve for 2 consecutive years. So anybody who was on your nominating committee last year cannot serve again. Let's see. And you'll find a section about the election procedure in your bylaws in Article 5, Section 4. Okay. Okay. One more thing. The president, as Terry mentioned, does not serve on the nominating committee. Yeah. Sorry. Ballot is a great tool to use. I have also put a fillable form. Sometimes in the last few years, I've been using a Google form. You'll see a link there on the bottom to one of those. It's actually, I find that sometimes you get a better response because people can just get on their computer, fill it out, and hit the button and send it to you. If you turn out the paper form, sometimes people are not as apt to look to fill it out. But this is a great way to find out if there are other people in your PTA who might be interested in helping that maybe you didn't know about. Okay. So the parliamentarian will give instructions to the nominating committee. You need to arrange the first meeting, contact all the people that are elected, and I would include the alternates when you make that contact, schedule a date that everybody can come. If for some reason one of your actual committee members cannot make it for the first meeting, then an alternate needs to step in their place. That's why I say go ahead and contact them all so they all know what the date and time is. Sometimes somebody gets sick or something happens and then you need an alternate. Once the alternate takes that person's place, they are become a member of that committee, and the person that did not show up is off the hook. And then at that meeting, you want to give instructions to the committee, explaining to them what the purpose of the committee is, choosing the best candidates, to keep it confidential. And the reason that we stress keeping confidential is because you want to be able to pick a good candidate, and maybe somebody has mixed feelings about somebody or the other, and you want to be able to have the opportunity for them to share that. And then that way, we don't want those things to get out or for other people to be upset because you talked about them, or that's why it's really important to keep confidentiality in that group. There are a list of job descriptions on CAPTA, and you should share those with the committee. Every office that we elect is for 1 year. You can serve in that position for 2 years, and that is the term limit, no more than 2 years. But when you get elected, you are only elected for 1 year. There's no guarantee that the person is elected the next year. It's often a courtesy and a nice thing to do. I mean, unless there's a big problem, we generally tend to invite people back to serve again, but it is not a requirement. You can only, you want to give your nominating committee a list of the current officers and who is been in there for 1 year and who has termed out, so that they know who they can invite back and who they can't invite back. I've also put a sample letter for the nominating committee on the website so that you can pull it, and it has like a little chart where you can fill it in, which the officers are, their contact information, how many years they've been there, so people will know who they can ask back and who they cannot. If someone has trimmed out, however, they can fill another position. So it's not that they can't be on the board anymore, they just can't do that position again. There are 2 appointed officers, the parliamentarian, as you know, and the corresponding secretary. and those people do not go on the slate. There should be only one nominee per office, and there should only be one person per office. So when you put out the slate, when they put out the slate, there should only be one name for each office. And you cannot elect co-officers. That is not allowed. If somebody says, oh, but I don't want to do it by myself, and so said they'll help me, that's totally fine. You need to pick one person that's going to be the officer. That other person can help them as much as they want. You can actually appoint them as an assistant to that person, but they cannot be co-officers because they need to have one name as an elected person. You want to let them know that they should consider balancing the board. You want to have a mix, of people who know kind of been around, who knows what's going on, and some new people, so that you kind of are training new people all the time, so that you don't get to a point where someday you have nobody left on your board. And then again, the committee itself will vote to choose who the nominees are. And a lot of times people will say, well, what happens? So you do have to post your slate 28 days before the election, which is why it's really important to get started early. If your meeting is in February, so then you're going to be doing your posting a month before. So what happens if you don't get all the people that you're supposed to get? That's okay. Go ahead and post your slate without those names. You can put open, and then if the nominating committee will continue to look for people until the election day, so they can continue to fill those spots up until the time of the election. If they still don't find anybody, then those can be filled from the floor or something else. I'm not going to talk about elections now, but I just wanted to let you know so that you have all the information to share with your nominating committee. The parliamentarian would help elect the chair, and it can be anybody if that's on the committee. It doesn't have to be a board member. If the parliamentarian is elected to the nominating committee, you would stay and serve. You can be the chair, but you don't have to be the chair. If you are not elected to the nominating committee, once you give them all the instructions, answer all their questions, then you say bye-bye, and then they go ahead and do the work. The chair has to make sure that they prepare the report and get the committee to sign it, make sure that the slate is posted. They should let you know, and that all information is all in the handouts that I gave you. All right, so I am done with my part. Does anybody have any questions about anything that I just said?
I have things to add. One thing is that your principal is expected to be a part of your nominating committee. They
True.
are an advisor should be an advisor of many of your committees, but it's in particular for the nominating committee. So keep that in mind as you're looking at meeting for nominating and how to incorporate and make sure that they are part of that process.
And let me just say that,
that
they can be elected to your nominating committee and be a part of your nominating committee. If they are not elected, they would be an advisor, so they would have input, but they wouldn't vote on who goes on the slate.
Right. And then the other thing was, there was a question about whether you would receive this information. We will give you the PowerPoint, but keep in mind that much of this is in that running your PTA from CAPTA in that publication. So do look at that and see how much of it is covered there, and in the handouts that are on our website. So there will be a little bit more complete information if you can put all of that together. We would appreciate that. Are there any questions at this point? I think we've kind of asked them. Ryan's saying that it's hard. the hardest part. Ryan, you want to speak for yourself? You can speak up. Are you?
Yeah, happy to. Look, it's very, very hard to recruit people. I'm biased. I was a first-time parliamentarian. I'm a first-time president. I put my name on the slate to be president because I felt bad. It's very rewarding to be on PTA, but it is very hard to get people to step up. So my feeling is if we on this Zoom can't one another hype and talk about the rewards of being on PTA, we'll never get new people to join. It's really, really stressful. And I don't know if Kristen, I pester Kristen all the time, and I say the hardest part is letting people know it's cool, everything's fine. It's a low stress thing. It's very rewarding being on PTA, but most people are not willing. In my experience, as I put in the chat.
Well, and it varies a lot, of course, but you can also sort of use your feeder schools sometimes, and working with people from there that if they have suggestions or ideas, sometimes that'll help. And the straw ballot, actually, if you send that out, believe it or not, you will get things back from people that you wouldn't have expected to get back from. So that actually is helpful in my perspective.
There is actually a handout in the packet for the nominating committee called Strategies for Filling Boards. It's something from CAPTA, and it has a bunch of ideas. I understand it is hard, and I feel like it's getting harder and harder these days to recruit volunteers.
I mean, Diane, we got to ask Terry. Terry, did you run we can't even find anybody to serve on school board. No one wants to be on school board. And I think Jen Gerson, are you related to Jeremy Gerson?
Yes. Maybe.
So, I mean, nobody wants it. It's a thankless gig, straight up thankless. Right, Terry? Yes, I mean, you should be.
Nobody would run this year. You're right. You're right.
You should be teaching a seminar on the rewards of public service. I'm guessing there are like good vibes.
Yeah.
For all public service.
You're right. It's hard, actually, at all levels. That's a good point, Ryan, that there's much less likelihood of people putting themselves out there for elected office now, too. You're exactly right.
That's
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Cherie, I think you have your hand up.
I'd run for school board, but I have to be an American citizen.
And we vote for you. Come on.
Thanks. One thing that I did, Ryan, this year at our first back to school night was we had, I made up some forms for people and asked them where they wanted to volunteer, Adventures in Art, library, track club, run club, that type of thing. And I also asked on that same form whether or not people were interested in being on the PTA board. So we actually got a list of people that were interested in being on our board. And what I've done is I've gone out and spoken to those people about the benefits of being on the board. And I think the common conception is that PTA is a fundraising arm and all they're expected to do is fundraise. But when you go out and talk to them about, the advocacy that you can do through PTA, child rights, having an influence on how the money is spent in the LCAP, there's a lot more people with business backgrounds that become more interested in what you're doing. So I actually think it would be good from a TCPTA perspective to look at designing a recruitment direct mail or an email where we can send that out to our units and out to our schools to try and get more participation, particularly from people, because in our school, lots of people said to me, oh, it's a really cliquey group of parents. And I was like, oh, I didn't really think I was a cliquey group of parents, but getting them involved and like saying, hey, well, how would you like to be the chair for this program and come along to our meeting and see how things are done at the meeting and then come on board. And so doing it that way and sharing a lot of that information, I think it just takes away some of the assumptions of what people think the PTA does. So
yeah, I agree with you. And the thing I tell people when I do a talk about PTA is we are not a fundraising organization. No. And in fact, we really are not. That's not one of our main goals. There are programs that we want to run that we need money for. So we will fundraise in order to support ourselves, but it's not intended to be a fundraising organization in any way.
Absolutely so not. We make resolutions at our team.
Yes.
In
Um,
fact, there is a
okay.
3-to-1 rule that says that we should have 3 programs for every 1 fundraiser that we run as part of PTA.
Oh, all right.
But yeah, I agree with you, Ryan. It actually could be. In fact, maybe we could get a task force going as to how to make that happen. What some of the things that we are doing is that we are Torrance Council has, you'll see at the next meeting actually, that we are recommending that we approve joining the Torrance the Torrance Chamber of Commerce and being more
I love
involved
it.
in the nonprofit group that's part of the Chamber of Commerce so that we can extend our pool and our influence perhaps, or at least knowledge about us further in the city. So yeah, we are trying to do more outreach too.
Well,
Good
and I
point.
don't know, I don't know about Nextdoor, that app, but there's a lot of people who complain mercilessly. And if any of those people on Nextdoor want to show up on this Zoom, they are welcome. It's being recorded. Come on in, let's go. We need you.
Yep,
Because I
yep,
can't handle some of these apps. It's so easy to criticize and hide, and nobody
yes.
shows up. And that's, I feel, there's a Pew Charitable Trust survey somewhere that shows that we actually need people to try and get involved.
Yeah, yeah, no, I
Let's
agree.
do that.
So I want to be aware of our time and not keep you guys much longer, but I do want to mention before we leave tonight, the program that's going to be happening on October 12th, because it's really critical to presidents that this is the first time ever that we've had a dedicated time to interact and collaborate with the administrators at our schools that has been officially sanctioned by TOSD and TCPTA as a joint event. So what will happen is we will have our normal association meeting, but then there will be a part of it that we will, our intent is to help inform the new administrators of the things we were just talking about. That PTA is not a fundraising organization, that we have all these other advocacies and advocacy functions and the things that we really want to do in terms of improving and supporting the family and student success so that they're aware. And then we actually have this really cool document. I think we're going to save it until then, that shows you the kinds of programs that all of our schools are doing and sort of how you compare to what the other schools are doing. I've never seen that done before either. So we have actually created that document as a baseline information to work with. And then you will actually sit with your principal and do some goal setting and some deliberation about the direction that you both want to see happen on your campus for the next school year. So that we really get those new administrators aware of PTA, informed about PTA, and that working with PTA is really important to do. So I think this is a rare opportunity. I hope you will all attend. If you know any other presidents who are not here tonight, please make sure that they know, and that it will be defined on the invitation that's going, actually it may have gone out while we were speaking this evening, but it will be talked about on that invitation. If you cannot attend in person, please send someone who will be able to work with your principal, because the principals will be there. TUSD has committed the principals to be there. So I really need our presidents to step up and also be there on October 12th. From that time period for you that's critical for you to be there is 10:30 to 12. 9:30 is our executive board meeting. If you can't make it at 9:30, 10:30 to 12 then is the critical time. Okay. Anybody have any questions about that or anything else? Do we need RSVP? Yes, you will be asked to RSVP, Veronica. In fact, that's what the invitation will ask you to do by Friday, so that we know that you are coming and that your principal can expect to see you there. And and before I forget, it also says this on the invitation, but please try to remember to bring your budget with you, because your budget is actually an essential document in doing planning and looking at the programs that you are running. So please try to bring that along with you. And we will try to make sure that those are available to you there too. That's why we changed our venue. It was going to be at the Torrance High Auditorium. We moved to a place where we could actually sit down and talk and have breakout sessions. So I'm hoping that this is productive and valuable for everyone. I will be asking for feedback after it happens. Okay, so nominating committees, it seems kind of weird to be doing a nominating committee already, but we have to do it now at our association meetings and get them elected so that they can do their work. Okay, any last words, Diane?
No, just know that we're here for you.
Did you
Yes,
get to that
please,
other
please.
question that Cherie had about the?
Yeah, I wrote back to her actually. In fact, I will
Okay.
find out for her. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't actually have an answer, so.
Was that the nonprofit ID question?
Oh, no, I didn't
No,
see
that was
that
the
one.
city council permits, like for movie nights or something.
Yeah, I have to find that out.
Yeah, I didn't see that question, but I did note that your CT number and all that is in your bylaws on the
Oh.
signature page. So your franchise tax board number, your IRS number, your charitable trust number, all of those things are in your bylaws.
So
Which is why we
I've
need to
got those,
protect them.
I've got those, Diane, but it's the non-profit ID that TUSD is asking for. Is that your CT number?
Yes, that's the charitable
It is the
Trust
CT number. Okay, all
number. I
right, thank
believe
you.
so.
Oh, and last but not least, there is a council directory that exists. In general, we have it finished by this time of year, most years. And in fact, it is ready to go. It will be an online resource. It covers all of the information for emails and phone numbers for Torrance Council officers for every unit and your officers and how to contact them, as well as administrators and elected officials, et cetera, et cetera. So it's actually a huge wealth of information, but it will be online. It will be sent to you as a read-only document so that you can utilize it. But please, please be judicious about use and prudent with its use. It is a lot of personal information of many people in the city of Torrance. And again, there's so many unscrupulous people. We don't want to have that information in the hands of that might not use it in the appropriate way. So please be careful with it, but utilize it and get in touch with other people that can be helpful to you. Okay. I think
That
that's
was
it.
shared last night.
What's that?
That was shared last night. So you
Yeah.
should have gotten a link.
Yes, so you should be able to go into it. That's what it is, in case you're wondering. All right, well, I appreciate your kind time and attention this evening. I know it's hard to take an evening away, but hopefully it was helpful. Oh, so you can see the QR code there. Please give us feedback on what you heard that was helpful, what you would have needed to have heard that you did not, and let us know how we can best help you. That's our intention here, is to be helpful to you. So we appreciate you taking the time and energy, and we'll see you, hopefully, all of you on October 12th. Okay, thank you.